Section 3 of After Dark. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. After Dark Part 2. Third. A rainy day. The children difficult to manage. William miserably despondent. Perhaps he influenced me, or perhaps I felt my little troubles with the children more than usual. But however it was, I have not been so heavy-hearted since the day when my husband first put on the green shade. A listless, hopeless sensation would steal over me. But why write about it? Better to try and forget it. There is always tomorrow to look to when today is at the worst. Fourth, tomorrow has proved worthy of the faith I put in it. Sunshine again out of doors, and as clear and true a reflection of it in my own heart as I can hope to have just at this time. Oh, that month, that one poor month of respite! What are we to do at the end of the month? Fifth. I made my short entry for yesterday in the afternoon, just before tea time, little thinking of events destined to happen with the evening that would be really worth chronicling, for the sake of the excellent results to which they are sure to lead. My tendency is to be too sanguine about everything, I know, but I am, nevertheless, firmly persuaded that I can see a new way out of our present difficulties, a way of getting money enough to keep us all in comfort at the farmhouse until William's eyes are well again. The new project which is to relieve us from all uncertainties for the next 6 months actually originated with me. It has raised me many inches higher in my own estimation already. If the doctor only agrees with my view of the case when he comes tomorrow, William will allow himself to be persuaded, I know, and then let them say what they please, I will answer for the rest. This is how the new idea first found its way into my head. We had just done tea. William, in much better spirits than usual, was talking with the young sailor, who is jocosely called here by the very ugly name of Foul-weather Dick. The farmer and his 2 eldest sons were composing themselves on the oaken settles for their usual nap. The dame was knitting, the 2 girls were beginning to clear the tea table, and I was darning the children's socks. To all appearance, this was not a very propitious state of things for the creation of new ideas, and yet my idea grew out of it for all that. Talking with my husband on various subjects connected with life in ships, the young sailor began giving us a description of his hammock, telling us how it was slung, how it was impossible to get into it any other way than stern foremost, whatever that may mean, how the rolling of the ship made it rock like a cradle, and how on rough nights it sometimes swayed to and fro at such a rate as to bump bodily against the ship's side and wake him up with the sensation of having just received a punch on the head from a remarkably hard fist. Hearing all this, I ventured to suggest that it must be an immense relief to him to sleep on shore in a good, motionless, solid, 4-posted bed. But to my surprise he scoffed at the idea, said he never slept comfortably out of his hammock, declared that he quite missed his occasional punch on the head from the ship's side, and ended by giving a most comical account of all the uncomfortable sensations he felt when he slept in a 4-post bed. The odd nature of one of the young sailor's objections to sleeping on shore reminded my husband, as indeed it did me too, of the terrible story of a bed in a French gambling house, which he once heard from a gentleman whose likeness he took. "You're laughing at me," says honest Foul-weather Dick, seeing William turn toward me and smile. "No, indeed," says my husband. "That last objection of yours to the 4-post beds on shore seems by no means ridiculous to me, at any rate. I once knew a gentleman, Dick, who practically realized your objection." "Excuse me, sir," says Dick after a pause and with an appearance of great bewilderment and curiosity, "but could you put 'practically realized' into plain English so that a poor man like me might have a chance of understanding you?" "Certainly," says my husband, laughing. "I mean that I once knew a gentleman who actually saw and felt what you say in jest you are afraid of seeing and feeling whenever you sleep in a 4-post bed. Do you understand that?" Foul-weather Dick understood it perfectly, and begged with great eagerness to hear what the gentleman's adventure really was. The dame, who had been listening to our talk, backed her son's petition. The 2 girls sat down expectant at the half-cleared tea-table. Even the farmer and his drowsy sons roused themselves lazily on the settle. My husband saw that he stood fairly committed to the relation of the story, so he told it without more ado. I have often heard him relate that strange adventure. William is the best teller of a story I ever met with, to friends of all ranks in many different parts of England, and I never yet knew it fail of producing an effect. The farmhouse audience were, I may almost say, petrified by it. I never before saw people look so long in the same direction and sit so long in the same attitude as they did. Even the servants stole away from their work in the kitchen and, unrebuked by master or mistress, stood quite spellbound in the doorway to listen. Observing all this in silence while my husband was going on with his narrative, the thought suddenly flashed across me: why should William not get a wider audience for that story, as well as for others which he has heard from time to time from his sitters, and which he has hitherto only repeated in private among a few friends? People tell stories in books and get money for them. What if we told our stories in a book? And what if the book sold? Why, freedom, surely, from the one great anxiety that is now preying on us. Money enough to stop at the farmhouse till William's eyes are fit for work again. I almost jumped up from my chair as my thought went on shaping itself in this manner. When great men make wonderful discoveries, do they feel sensations like mine, I wonder? Was Sir Isaac Newton within an ace of skipping into the air when he first found out the law of gravitation? Did Friar Bacon long to dance when he lit the match and heard the first charge of gunpowder in the world go off with a bang? I had to put a strong constraint on myself, or I should have communicated all that was passing in my mind to William before our friends at the farmhouse. But I knew it was best to wait until we were alone, and I did wait. What a relief it was when we all got up at last to say good night. The moment we were in our own room, I could not stop to take so much as a pin out of my dress before I began. "My dear," said I never heard you tell that gambling house adventure so well before. What an effect it had upon our friends! What an effect, indeed, it always has wherever you tell it!" So far he did not seem to take much notice. He just nodded, and began to pour out some of the lotion in which he always bathes his poor eyes the last thing at night. "And as for that, William," I went on, "all your stories seem to interest people. What a number you have picked up, first and last, from different sitters, in the 15 years of your practice as a portrait painter! Have you any idea how many stories you really do know?" No, he could not undertake to say how many just then. He gave this answer in a very indifferent tone, dabbing away all the time at his eyes with the sponge and lotion. He did it so awkwardly and roughly, as it seemed to me, that I took the sponge from him and applied the lotion tenderly myself. "Do you think," said I, "if you turned over one of your stories carefully in your mind beforehand, say, the one you told tonight, for example, that you could repeat it all to me so perfectly and deliberately that I should be able to take it down in writing from your lips?" Yes, of course he could, but why ask that question? "Because I should like to have all the stories that you've been in the habit of relating to our friends set down fairly in writing, by way of preserving them from ever being forgotten." Would I bathe his left eye now, because that felt the hottest tonight? I began to forebode that his growing indifference to what I was saying would soon end in his fairly going to sleep before I had developed my new idea, unless I took some means of forthwith of stimulating his curiosity, or, in other words, of waking him into a proper state of astonishment and attention. "William," said I, without another syllable of preface, "I've got a new plan for finding all the money we want for our expenses here." He jerked his head up directly and looked at me. "What plan?" "This. The state of your eyes prevents you, for the present, from following your profession as an artist, does it not? Very well. What are you to do with your idle time, my dear? Turn author. And how are you to get the money we want? By publishing a book." "Good gracious, Leah, are you out of your senses?" he exclaimed. I put my arm round his neck and sat down on his knee, the course I always take when I want to persuade him to anything with as few words as possible. "Now, William, listen patiently to me," I said. "An artist lies under this great disadvantage in case of accidents. His talents are of no service to him unless he can use his eyes and fingers. An author, on the other hand, can turn his talents to account just as well by means of other people's eyes and fingers as by means of his own. In your present situation, therefore, you have nothing for it, as I said before, but to turn author. Wait, and hear me out. The book I want you to make is a book of all your stories. You shall repeat them, and I will write them down from your dictation. Our manuscript shall be printed, we will sell the book to the public, and so support ourselves honourably in adversity by doing the best we can to interest and amuse others." While I was saying all this, I suppose in a very excitable manner, my husband looked, as our young sailor friend would phrase it, quite taken aback. "You were always quick at contriving, Leah," he said. "But how in the world came you to think of this plan?" "I thought of it while you were telling them the gambling house adventure downstairs," I answered. "It is an ingenious idea, and a bold idea," he went on thoughtfully, "but it is one thing to tell a story to a circle of friends, and another thing to put it into a printed form for an audience of strangers. Consider, my dear, that we are neither of us used to what is called writing for the press." "Very true," said I, "but nobody is used to it when they first begin, and yet plenty of people have tried the hazardous literary experiment successfully. Besides, in our case, we have the materials ready to our hands. Surely we can succeed in shaping them presentably if we aim at nothing but the simple truth." "Who is to do the eloquent descriptions, and the striking reflections, and all that part of it?" said William, perplexedly shaking his head. "Nobody," I replied. "The eloquent descriptions and the striking reflections are just the parts of a story book that people never read. Whatever we do, let us not, if we can possibly help it, write so much as a single sentence that can be conveniently skipped. Come, come," I continued, seeing him begin to shake his head again. "No more objections, William. I am too certain of the success of my plan to endure them. If you still doubt, let us refer the new project to a competent arbitrator. The doctor is coming to see you tomorrow. I will tell him all that I have told you, and if you will promise on your side, I will engage on mine to be guided entirely by his opinion." William smiled and readily gave the promise. This was all I wanted to send me to bed in the best spirits. For of course I should never have thought of mentioning the doctor as an arbitrator if I had not known beforehand that he was sure to be on my side. 6th. The arbitrator has shown that he deserved my confidence in him. He ranked himself entirely on my side before I had half done explaining to him what my new project really was. As to my husband's doubts and difficulties, the dear good man would not so much as hear them mentioned. "No objections," he cried gaily. "Set to work, Mr. Kerby, and make your fortune. I always said your wife was worth her weight in gold, and here she is now, all ready to get into the bookseller's scales and prove it. Set to work, set to work." "With all my heart," said William, beginning at last to catch the infection of our enthusiasm. "But when my part of the work and my wife's has been completed, what are we to do with the produce of our labour?" "Leave that to me," answered the doctor. "Finish your book and send it to my house. I will show it at once to the editor of our country newspaper. He has plenty of literary friends in London, and he will be just the man to help you. By the by," added the doctor, addressing me, "you think of everything, Mrs. Kerby. Pray, have you thought of a name yet for the new book?" At that question it was my turn to be taken aback. The idea of naming the book had never once entered my mind. "A good title is of vast importance," said the doctor, knitting his brows thoughtfully. "We must all think about that. What shall it be? Mrs. Kerby, what shall it be?" "Perhaps something may strike us after we've fairly set to work," my husband suggested. "Talking of work," he continued, turning to me, "how are you to find time, Leah, with your nursery occupations, for writing down all the stories as I tell them?" "I've been thinking of that this morning," said I, "and I've come to the conclusion that I shall have but little leisure to write from your dictation in the daytime. What with dressing and washing the children, teaching them, giving them their meals, taking them out to walk, and keeping them amused at home, to say nothing of sitting sociably at work with the dame and her 2 girls in the afternoon, I am afraid I shall have few opportunities of doing my part of the book between breakfast and tea time. But when the children are in bed, and the farmer and his family are reading or dozing, I should have at least 3 unoccupied hours to spare. So, if you don't mind putting off our working time till after dark—" "There's the title!" shouted the doctor, jumping out of his chair as if he had been shot. "Where?" cried I, looking all round me in the surprise of the moment, as if I had expected to see the title magically inscribed for us on the walls of the room. "In your last words, to be sure," rejoined the doctor. "You said just now that you would not have leisure to write from Mr. Kerby's dictation till after dark. What can we do better than name the book after the time when the book is written? Call it boldly 'After Dark.' Stop! Before anybody says a word for or against it, let us see how the name looks on paper." I opened my writing desk in a great flutter. The doctor selected the largest sheet of paper and the broadest nibbed pen he could find, and wrote in majestic round text letters, with alternate thin and thick strokes beautiful to see, the 2 cabalistic words, "After Dark." We all 3 laid our heads together over the paper, and in breathless silence studied the effect of the round text. William raising his green shade in the excitement of the moment, and actually disobeying the doctor's orders about not using his eyes in the doctor's own presence. After a good long stare, we looked round solemnly in each other's faces and nodded. There was no doubt whatever on the subject after seeing the round text. In one happy moment the doctor had hit on the right name. "I have written the title page," said our good friend, taking up his hat to go, "and now I leave it to you 2 to write the book." Since then I have mended 4 pens and bought a quire of letter paper at the village shop. William is to ponder well over his stories in the daytime, so as to be quite ready for me after dark. We are to commence our new occupation this evening. My heart beats fast and my eyes moisten when I think of it. How many of our dearest interests depend upon the one little beginning that we are to make to-night. End of Section 3